It's never been expected, and what is not expected doesn't get done.
Hmm.
And so, most people are not doing it, not because they're lazy. And I wouldn't even say not even because they're arrogant. I don't know if they truly understand how much better they can be no matter how good they are.
Uh, you would not believe. I was in the US. I was studying in Miami, and my first year, my freshman year, was pathetic because I was out of India. I didn't have any friends out there. But my second year, I became a demand guy on campus.
Ask yourself what activity you did to prepare your people for people. What activity did you? Did you do a one-on-one with them? And in your one-on-ones, did you talk about the upcoming meetings? And did you prepare them? Did you make them get certain things done for that meeting?
Hi guys, this is your friend Ashish Janiani. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you are an entrepreneur, if you are a sales manager, if you have a team, big, small, family owned, this channel is for you because we primarily speak about business, we speak about funding, and most primarily we speak about sales. So if you've got anything that you want to learn about sales, I think you're on the right channel because of the experts that we bring for you all the time that you see on this channel. I've got one more fellow, okay, in that regards, and I'm super excited because of the experience that he has. He's got 20 years of experience creating records in sales and teaching others to do sales and developing what I feel is more important, which is sales leadership. This man has written several books. Some of his books include Serve Up, Coach Down, The Leaders Playbook, The Sales Leaders Playbook, and a lot more. So, you help me welcome Nathan Jamail. All right, so I'm excited for this interview, especially because I think you've taken a step further, and you speak a lot about sales leadership, from what I understand. And I wanted to start over there. Uh, if we could speak about the difference between being a sales guy, a sales professional, and a sales leader.
Okay, so the difference between a sales, let me clarify that if I could. So the difference between a sales professional and sales leader, it'd be in my explanations in my books, is a sales professional is a salesperson who practices. A sales leader is like you would call a sales manager. So
Hmm.
think of it that there's a difference between a sales leader and a sales manager. Let's stick with there, right? So think of a sales professional as a salesperson who is like a top of their game. And so let me give you an example. A lot of people think they're sales professionals, but if you compare sales to sports, everyone thinks they're an athlete. But to be a professional athlete, you get paid. You're the top in your game. You're in the top 1%. And number one thing a professional athlete does that most athletes don't do is a professional athlete practices 90% of the time and plays the game 10% of the time. In sales, most salespeople never practice. They train, they go to work, they sell, but they don't practice. And so I always tell people, you might be a successful salesperson, you might be a fancy dress salesperson, and you might sell expensive things. But I believe that if you don't practice, which most salespeople do not, you are not a sales professional. Um, I think one of the things that is what we're going to focus on today
Hmm.
is what makes a great sales leader, right?
Yes.
And so to clarify that, so that's why I want to clarify at the very beginning. Think of a sales professional. I wrote 4 books, and 2 of them is one's called the Sales Professionals Playbook, and that is the playbook for all salespeople within our organization. It started out as a 3-ring binder, and its first creation date in 1998, and for
Hmm.
the last over 3 decades that is, it's just been growing and growing and growing, and or 2 decades, and
Oh.
then we had a sales leaders um, game plan, which was again back in the day in 1998. What that was if you were a manager for us, a sales manager for us, this is your world. Um, you can coach your team any way you wanted, but you had no option but to coach them. And so that became a book in 1998. And so I think today you and I are going to speak about the sales leader role more so than the sales professional's role.
Yes, exactly. And I just want to have one more interaction on that one point before we come to sales leadership. If somebody is aware of the shortcoming that they need to practice and then they are not practicing, what is the reason behind that? Outside that excuse that I don't have time, what is the real mental reason that this person is not practicing?
Well, you gotta realize something. If there is a sales call coming up, let's just put it into perspective of reality for a salesperson. Right now, especially given the environment we're all in, where we're doing meetings via Zoom and salespeople. I have a keynote, 3 keynotes, 2 today and 1 tomorrow, and so for sales leaders and salespeople. If you think about this, let's look at all the salespeople who have a virtual meeting today, or let's give an extra day tomorrow. Let's say all the salespeople that you and I know and don't know. If we took up all the salespeople have meetings tomorrow, I would venture that 9 out of 10, and I'm probably being conservative. I'm probably giving way too much credit, but 9 out of 10 of them are not. They might be preparing for tomorrow. Don't get me wrong. There's a difference between preparing and practicing. I have no doubt in my mind that 8 out of 10 of them are absolutely preparing for their meeting tomorrow, which means they're doing research on the customer. They're kind of trying to find out what their needs might be through the behind the scenes. And they're probably even finding similar cases or similar customers they have because they don't know what to expect because most likely they haven't had the meeting yet, but they're preparing for the meeting. But make no mistake, 9 out of 10 of them have not scrimmaged it or practiced it. And there's a difference, right? You ask why. I think the reason why 9 out of 10 salespeople are not practiced, they might be somewhat prepared, but they're not practiced for tomorrow's meeting, is in sales, it's never been expected. It's not demanded by leaders. Like there aren't sales leaders out there saying, you better scrimmage or role play that meeting 3 times before you go tomorrow, or calling and saying, hey, we need to scrimmage this meeting before you have it tomorrow. They're just going and managing somewhat of activity. It's never been expected, and what is not expected doesn't get done. And so, most people are not doing it, not because they're lazy. And I wouldn't even say not even because they're arrogant. I don't know if they truly understand how much better they can be no matter how good they are. In other words, a lot of us are successful based off the gifts that we were given. If God gave you talent, like you look at a lot of some of these God-given athletes, they always say that's God-given talent. I've been in sales all my life, and God gave me a gift to. I'm out smoking. I enjoy it. I mean, He kind of gave me these gifts, and charisma might be one of them, and and all this stuff. And then my parents gave me other gifts. They gave me the discipline. They gave me kind of, and coaches did. But I always tell people what we do is based off our attributes and our skill set, or our attributes and our talents and gifts. And these are gifts. We didn't do anything for these. So we can't say, thank you. I didn't do anything at all very hard. It was just a gift. And so my challenge to people is, if we're successful with these gifts, imagine how much better we would be if we actually practiced the skill. I mean, and so I think the number one reason why people are not practicing for tomorrow's sales call is 2 reasons. One, no one's making them. And that's true in sports, by the way. Like if coaches didn't make professional athletes show up to practice during the week, 90% of them wouldn't show up.
Yeah.
I don't care if you played world football, American football, baseball, whatever it is. If you play a sport, you have to practice all the time. Yet, in professional athletes, if the coach didn't make them go, none of them would go. Or 90% of them wouldn't go. Well, you take that same idea. So the first one is no one's making them practice. In fact, most of them would be like, what do you mean practice? It's crazy. and the second one is most of us can do well enough on the gifts that we've been given. And we just will, and it's funny. I had one gentleman who was somewhat talented, but he was more driven than talented. And so I was working with his boss. I said, he'll be your number one guy. He's just so, he's kind of rough around the edges. He's kind of crass, maybe a little cocky. I said, yeah, but he is driven. And I'll take a somewhat talented guy with a work ethic who's driven over a superstar who's not driven at all. And within 2 years, he was the number one rep. It's like all the great hero sports movies, right? It's that hardworking kid that everybody's rooting for, and everybody puts them in the back because they're not the biggest as fastest, but ultimately they become the fan favorite because they're the hardest working.
Yeah. Okay. My next question is, uh, let's talk about sales leadership, starting from your book, the Sales Leadership Playbook. Why did you write that book, and who should read that book and find what?
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the book itself was a 30 binder when I spent as a sales leader from 1990. I think it was 96. I got my first management job as a sales leader. And, from my mentors, there were certain things that I learned. And I think in 96, we went from the worst sales team in the region to the best sales team in the region. In 1998, or 97, I went to a new field and worked into the Sprint PCS days, which was before really wireless was big. And, we implemented, it was a 3 binder, and it was, I was a leader of sales leaders. And it was a formula that said, listen, this is what we do. And you have 4 key jobs as a sales leader. And the first one is you have to create a thriving environment. And that is everyone thinks they do this. Create a thriving environment is very difficult because you have to remove everyone out of the environment who is not willing to thrive, which means no matter how good someone is, if they got a bad attitude, you got to get rid of them, or get them to understand how negatively impacting their bad attitude is and get them to change. But the first one is you cannot ask your team to thrive if you don't give them an environment they can thrive in. So the first one is you have to have this thriving environment. And there are certain expectations of that. So a lot of people say, you have to put the right people on the right seats at the right time, right? You got to get the right people on the bus. And it's like, what the hell does that mean? Like, what do I do? And so one of the things that I was very clear on is if I gave you something like you have to create a thriving environment, I was very clear on what that meant. That meant you must remove every person on your team who has a bad attitude. Remove them by either physically saying, hey, you need to leave the team, or saying, hey, I don't know if you know this, but you're kind of cranky or you're negative and your attitude's bringing everyone's down, man. You can't do that. It's not fair to the team. You have, so you have to have a sales leader who is willing to hold people accountable no matter the sacrifice. Now you got to think about this for a minute. Most sales leaders tolerate bad attitudes, bad performance, not because we don't like conflict or we're nice people. We truly do. Accountability, a lack of accountability in business and sales more than anything is us being selfish as leaders. And I'll give you an example. It's easy to say you got to hold everyone accountable. If they have a bad attitude, you got to get rid of them. And it's easy to say that. But when you think about it, if you're a sales manager and you have 6 sales reps and your quotas, there's 6 sales reps quotas combined, and you got a guy who's doing 150% of their number and they're a jerk, you're like, yeah, well, I can't afford to get rid of them because if I get rid of them, I miss my number. So I just need to, I'll just put them in a corner so they don't bother anyone else. And a great sales leader, and one of the things in the Sales Leaders Playbook, the reason it was written, is we had to take that option off the table because it's too hard to make the decision. And so you have to say, listen, I'll give up my ace in the hole. Okay, I'll go to you and say, Ashish, you might be a stud, but you're a cancer. And so I'm going to have to get rid of you. And I have to be willing to push that chip out there. I got to be willing to tell you, hey, you got to commit to the team or not, else, or we're gonna have to make a change. You got to be brave enough to do that and sacrifice your own income for the betterment of the team. And we wrote this book. So the thriving environment, again, sounds cool, but you got to be really brave. There's another simple one. Even the easy one decision, which you would think would be the easy decision, is a hard decision. There's no saying in sales, a bad body is better than a nobody, right? And it's terrible. And so, but if you think of it, let's take it from the sales manager's perspective. If all of a sudden I've got a team of 6 and I'm a roll-up quota income guy, and I got one guy who's doing 50% of quota, So he's not doing well at all. And let's say he's even lazy or she's lazy and not even doing a good job. But they're hitting half their number and they're helping me get my number. I mean, if I get rid of them, then I miss my number. Maybe I miss my bonus. So, they're not good. But a bad person is better than a good person.
So you got me curious, Nathan. I just want to ask you one question
Yeah.
on that, right? How important is for a sales leader to pick the right organization with the right mindset to be able to implement what you're saying, including some of the guys who are like you and me, who are coaches, and when we pick up clients, right? So what you're saying is so crucial to the culture of the company and the long-term success of that team and the entire organization. But how do you practically, is it possible for a sales leader to be that picky with the organization that he's going to work with?
Absolutely. But I'll tell you, I don't think you have to be that picky. I think most organizations would thrive to have a leader who's doing this. I mean, think about this for a minute. Think of an organization. Here's the thing. You can't be a great sales coach and operate from a position of fear. And I deal with this all the time. I have clients right now where we got salespeople who are pushing around their leader. Like the sales leader is afraid to hold them accountable because what if they leave and take their client? And I'm like, let me explain something to you. So the thriving culture is one of them, but a salesperson who works for a sales leader, I ain't going to call him a sales leader. I'm going to call him a sales manager. Who works for a sales manager. If that sales manager is afraid of losing that salesperson more than the salesperson is afraid of losing their job, that salesperson will never respect. You can't respect a leader who's afraid of you. You can't. It's amazing to me. I look back and I say, it's like a marriage. I've been married 16 years and 15 years. And I got to tell you, I think it's a spouse, right? If one person is so afraid of losing the other person, they're going to push them away, right? Because you've lost your self-worth, you've lost your confidence. And so you become this scared spouse that says, oh, I'll do whatever you do. Don't leave me. No one wants to stay married to that. What I love about my wife is she doesn't need me. I mean, in fact, sometimes she might prefer not having me. I think we love each other, but I think what we love about each other is that we're super strong together. We're strong independently. And I think that's true in sales and leadership. And so one thing I tell sales leaders is, you said about picking organizations. I think an organization and a leadership team has to believe that they're worthy of great people. And if you think for a minute that your company is not worthy of great salespeople, well, then it's probably not worthy of great sales. You got to believe that. Listen, there's an old movie. The name on the back of the front of the shirt is more important than the name on the back of the shirt, right? And so, yes, I think you have to be. When you pick an organization as a leader, I think you have to make sure you're in alignment with that. I wrote a book called Serve Up, Coach Down, which was my most recent book. And Serve Up, Coach Down says, if you don't love the company you work for or the boss that you serve, you should quit your job. And I did many radio interviews, and I'll never forget one person said, people just can't quit their jobs. And I'm like, they can. I said, you think I'm being mean? Like I'm saying you can't quit your job. I have more struggle with someone who takes someone else's money as an employee. Like if you were paying me and I take your paycheck and I turn around and tell my buddies, yeah, my boss is an idiot. Yet I took your money. I always like, why don't you be a man and say that to their face? I think we have a commitment, a moral commitment that we need to be great at whatever we do. And if you're a sales leader, your job is to make your team better, period. Right? And so I think you have to work for organizations that you are in alignment with. I think for you to work for a company that you're not in alignment with purely for money, I think is terrible. Now, listen,
right?
Here's what I do believe. I think good people are hard to find. I think every leader, they'll tell you, the hardest part of being a leader is finding talent.
How do you find them?
Right? Finding talent is the hardest part of being a leader. Well, here's my question to you. If finding talent is the most difficult part of leadership, why would a highly talented person ever keep a job they don't love?
They shouldn't,
If you're the
right?
most seeked out resource, why would you do something you don't love? I don't buy it. And so I think to answer your question, you have to be in alignment with who you go to work for.
So
I think
what's
more
the
importantly,
difference?
what's that?
No, go ahead.
I think what's more importantly is you got to be willing to do your job, even if it might put you in a short-term inconvenience. In other words, you got to go to your boss and say, "Hey, listen, this is going to get worse before it gets better," and share your strategies. Here's what I'll tell you: the biggest thing about this, it never gets worse. It always gets better. And your fear was a lot bigger. The fear was bigger than the reality. Most salespeople, when they leave their jobs, don't take their clients with them.
Correct.
And and this is a double-edged sword, right? And now listen to me. I'm a sales guy all my life. I think if I got stud sales rep, let me tell you something. My stud sales rep, they have something in common. One, I don't ever have to beg them to stay. They're committed. They're killing it, and I'm pushing them harder than anyone's ever pushed them. I make them show up to practice. I don't care if you're 200% of quota. We're going to scrimmage before your call in a minute. And the reason why is my stud scrimmaged is unbeatable. And so, and my studs know that. I believe you've got to be such a great sales coach as a leader that your employees know that I'm great, but I'm great because I got you as a coach helping me and pushing me. If a salesperson, when I was successful as a salesperson, I was a much more successful salesperson with strong coaches than I was on my with me on my own. And I recognize that. And so certain leaders, I might have been killing it, but I'm listening to that coach because that's what great athletes do, and that's what superstars do.
So a good coach is so important, right? And that's what I wanted to ask you this. What is the difference between a sales manager and a sales leader?
All right, so let's change that. So let's change it to, okay, so I think a sales manager manages a team. I think a sales leader coaches their team. Now, there's someone that says in my last book I wrote, the difference between are all leaders coaches and are all coaches leaders, right? And that was in the Leadership Playbook, which came out a couple of years later. And I think it created from this clarification of, hey, you don't say you didn't write a book called the Sales Coaches Playbook. You wrote a book called the Sales Leaders Playbook, and all you talked about was coaching. So are all leaders coaches and are all coaches leaders? And I wrote in the Leadership Playbook, which was in 2014, I think, 16. And I said, all great coaches are great leaders, but not all great leaders are great coaches. So, and here's what I mean. I think being a great leader is more about who you are. You're strong. You can share a vision. You hold people accountable. People believe in you. They know you got your back. They know you'll lead from the front. I mean, a great leader is kind of the core of who you are. And I believe in somewhat of what you do, right? How you show up. I believe coaching is the activity. And so there are great leaders who don't coach. And because coaching is about making people better, no matter how good they are. So a great coach is being proactive. Not all great leaders are proactive. What I mean by that is this. A great leader doesn't make all their people scrimmage. You could be a great leader and not make any of your people scrimmage. You call it role playing for me. A great coach would never let their team go to a game, not scrimmage. And here's the confusion. A lot of people think they coach and they don't. A lot of people confuse giving feedback with coaching. See, a lot of people look at their coaching and they say, well, I coach my people. I say, how do you coach them? Well, we go through an activity and I say what worked, what didn't work, what didn't you like. My favorite is some people say, I coach people, and I say, well, how do you coach them? And they say, I give them direction and let them do their thing. I don't tell them how to do their job. That's the exact opposite of coaching, right? I want a coach prepares you for an opportunity. If you only give feedback, that opportunity is over with, right? So I didn't prepare you, I just corrected you. And so it's about preparation, not correction. And so the biggest difference when you look at a manager does not coach at all. They might manage activity. They might inspect your funnel. They might make sure you hit your number, but they are managing the people and managing the process. I believe you should never, if you manage your people, you'll manage them to mediocrity. If you coach your people, you'll coach them to excellence. And there are certain, you can look at it. So for example, if someone says, well, did you scrimmage with your people this week before their meetings? No. Okay. Difficult to say you coach and didn't scrimmage. And this is just my opinion. I'll tell you, I get a lot of managers go, well, there's two ways to look at it, Nathan. I said, there is, and mine's right, but whatever. No. And I say, listen, ask yourself what activity you did to prepare your people for a meeting. What activity did you do? Did you do a one-on-one with them? And in your one-on-ones, did you talk about the upcoming meetings? And did you prepare them? Did you make them get certain things done for that meeting? A coach makes you show up in the most smallest things, right? It's funny. And there was a sports coach, and he made all his people wear, certain socks. And one of the guys says, well, why do we have to wear the socks? We play, polo, or it wasn't polo. It was like the highlighter, I believe, what they call it. And the coach made him wear all the socks. And the coach says, and that was his rule, right? And he says, the simple fact that you're asking me why you have to wear the socks tells me you're not the right mentality for the team. And for him, that was his tester of, that idea of, is the team more important than I? And so a coach does those types of things. A coach makes a team better. A coach makes sure everyone contributes. A manager, make sure you hit the number. A coach is going to do practice meetings. Managers do sales meetings. And now this isn't just a word change. One of the things, the biggest challenge in leadership is how do we keep our people motivated? There's a reason why the new guy is the most motivated. There's a reason why the new guy is the most motivated person in the office, because the new guys like drinking out of a fire hose. They're learning. They're excited about the opportunity. Well, in managers, we tend to, once our people get good enough, we just leave them alone and they become complacent. So managers do staff meetings, go around the horn, give updates, and then, okay, guys, go do your job. Sales coaches actually practice or work on a skill in every one of their weekly meetings. So again, a great sales coach must be a great leader, but a great leader doesn't have to be a sales coach. It's okay. You can still be a great leader, but a sales manager, I think the biggest thing I'll tell you is it's okay to be a sales manager in title. It is not to be okay as a sales manager in principle. I think you listen, you're the sales manager. And I think being a great sales manager is being a great sales coach.
Okay. All right. Now, if an entrepreneur, a family business, a consultant trying to expand his organization, or a sales leader is watching this, what book would you ask them to start with from the books that you've written? And 3 tips that you would give to these guys, because that's the audience that will be listening to this.
Yeah. So, hands down, all my books would be the top list. But now if I would say, hey, you need to pick one book right now and start it out, I would tell you go to the Sales Leaders Playbook, and then I'd tell you go to the Leadership Playbook, because Sales Leaders Playbook is how to do a sales meeting, how to do one-on-ones. It is the how-to book. It is, you want to know how to do a quarterly peer review? Boom. You want to know how to set expectations? It's a fast, easy book. It was the guideline of being a sales leader for my team. And I took it from that. This is how you're going to do a one-on-one. This is why they're important. This is the results of them. And so it's a very good book for someone who, I don't care if you've been a leader for 50 years. it's relevant whether you've been doing it for 50 minutes or 50 years. If a great sales leader implements the principles of the sales leaders playbook, they'll be better. And you can't argue with me. I tell leaders all the time, you can't argue with me, because all I'm asking you to do in the book, is give more of you to your team. And unless you're a bad coach, giving more of you to your people should make them better. And so it's kind of like I tell salespeople, you can't argue with me on being a sales professional, because I'm not telling you what questions to ask. I'm just telling you need to have really good ones that are purposeful, and there are definitions of purposeful, but you can't tell me I'm wrong because I'm not telling you what to say. And so, sales leaders is the absolute. This is how you do the sales leaders. The sales leaders playbook, or the leadership playbook, which is the one that's behind me to the right, the black and blue, is good because it really tells you the overall guiding principles of being a coach. Right? It's kind of big. It's kind of the big picture. It's the why behind the what, but really the leadership playbook has a lot of samples of people who thought they were coaching. So maybe they started the leadership sales leaders playbook. They thought they were doing it. And then as they really started digging in, they were saying the words, but not doing the work. Now, there are 3 books that I read that I have not written. I read them every single year. And I think every person should read them, whether you're a salesperson, a sales leader, a dad, a mom. I made my daughter read them before she left for college. My rule was you can go to college, but you have to read 3 books. And so the first one, she actually had to read 4 or 5, but that's a whole other story. But the first one is Think and Grow Rich. Yeah. One of the best books ever written. Is written in the 40s. Is written by Napoleon Hill. I listen to it 2 to 3, maybe 4 times a year. Think and Grow Rich is probably one of the best books, other than mine, of course, that's ever been written. I love it. It's about how you think will determine how you behave. Have you read Think and Grow Rich?
Oh yeah, I've read it 3 times, including the audio. It's just like, I keep buying it and then I go back to the audio. It's an addiction because it's so deep, and you can't have enough of it.
Yeah, I love thinking, and I listen again. I'm an audiobook guy, even though I write books for a living. I'm an audiobook guy. And I record and that's the reason why I record all my own audiobook. I want the author to read it to me, just my personal preference. But my second favorite book, another old classic, is How to Win Friends, Influence People. Again, written in the 40s, Dale Carnegie. Spectacular book. And because I think it talks about the power of humility. And it's one of those things that makes, it's like I teach salespeople. If you can spend more time understanding someone's perspectives, instead of trying to tell them about what you do or what you sell, you'll sell more. And Dale Carnegie just nails it with this. And what I find interesting about it is a lot of salespeople do kind of those activities that Dale talks about accidentally, based off just kind of who they are. I think what Dale Carnegie does for those who already have that kind of success, he turns I think what he does to us is he gets us to think about it. And so what we're doing is turning an accidental behavior into a purposeful action. And you cannot improve at a skill if you're accidentally doing it or doing it just because. It has to be an intentional behavior before you can actually practice it or improve at it. And so I love the Dale Carnegie books for that reason. I think, again, great book to listen to or read, engaging, and again, old book. There are several good new ones, but if you had to say what are your 2 top, that's it. And then another one that for leaders, and this is probably just more for people, but I think mine are the best leadership books. But there's a book I started reading and listening to purely because I was watching TV and Tom Brady happened to read this book called The 4 Agreements.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, if this guy's reading this book and he's Tom Brady and he reads it every year, I'm like, maybe I should listen to it or read it. And so I bought the book. Literally, I was in a hotel room getting ready for a speech, and I saw this interview on TV, and I went, So I literally went on Audible there and downloaded it. And spectacular book. I had my daughter read it. My brothers read it. My wife and I read it. Again, another one of those books that we read every year. And so, it's about how we limit ourselves and what agreements we make with ourselves. It's spectacular. Have you read 4 Agreements?
Oh yeah. So I was just going to tell you a story on that. The fact
Yeah.
that your daughter read it, and she must be around 16 or 18, right? I read it when I was 18 years old, Miguel Ruiz. And the impact that it's going to have on her. And this is important for parents who are listening to this. I thought when I was reading the book that this is how the world operates. So it was easy for me to pass it into my subconscious. So I didn't have a lot of conscious gutter, right? Like, I mean, there's so much. So I just thought, yeah, this guy is, what he is. He's telling this to an 80-year-old boy. And I think that's how it works. So it just went into my subconscious. And the same year, when I started giving out so much love, unconditional love, uh, you would not believe. I was in the US. I was studying in Miami, and my first year, my freshman year, was pathetic because I was out of India. I didn't have any friends out there. But my second year, I became a demand guy on campus. I was named the Ladies Man of the Year in my last year, but I didn't do anything like that. All that happened was I met some good people because I started giving out a lot of unconditional love. And I've got these friends with me that changed my life. They changed me as a person. And it happened because of the 4 agreements that I made with myself because I thought that's how it worked. Now, the other part of it is if I read it now, it's going to be tough because you know the world on how it operates. And you're like, yeah, this is not easy. This is so tough. How can you be unconditional? And man, like your daughter is going to get so much out of it.
Well, and I'll tell you one thing I do. And I tell people, listen, I listen to books over. So my note taking is I listen to them over and over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
I bet I've listened to Think and Grow Rich 50 times.
Wow.
And I've got new books, right? I mean, I've got I love like Selling Naked's a good book. And I'm, there's just so many good books out there that you can, Marcus Buckingham's got several. There's just a bunch of good books. And so I listen to a book every single day.
Yeah, wow.
30 minutes a day. I'm listening to a book. I do it every day. If I'm driving somewhere, I throw in my audiobook. I don't listen to the radio. Sure as heck don't listen to the news. But I think, this whole idea of what makes a great salesperson. Listen, I said earlier, your job is to make a thriving environment. I think your second job as a great sales leader is to make everyone better. Your job, to make everyone go to practice and to do that. So there is a need for this. One of the biggest problems we have as sales leaders is we always think that accountability has to do with our weak players. That's not the truth. Accountability, the best sales leader makes their best players, they hold them accountable. But a lot of sales leaders don't do it because they're afraid they're going to leave. And I'm like, listen, I promise you, your great salespeople are not going to leave if you push them. They'll actually respect you for it. They'll be grateful for it. You just got to quit being so scared. And so we got to have a thriving environment. We've got to make our people better no matter how good or bad they are. And so that goes into the idea that we must make everyone practice. Most athletes won't show up to practice. So as sales leader, you've got to mandate practice. So that's the second one. The third one is what I was touching on a minute ago. You have to hold all people accountable. You've got to move your people up or out of the organization. Always. Your people should be either getting better or moving on. And that's an accountability issue. So thriving culture, again, kind of built around that the accountability, but it's also saying, listen, you got to smile every single day you're here. You got to kind of set the standards of what this locker room, per se, looks like. The second one is you got to make sure everyone comes to practice. The third one is you got to hold people accountable, which means you got to be willing to pull the trigger and say, listen, either commit to this or not. And like us as humans, if you do these things, if you will set the standard, you don't have to worry about beating people up. Everybody wants to be a part of an environment that's successful, thriving, high energy. It's got enthusiasm. People want to be a part of that, even if they don't know it. And so you've got to have this accountability piece. And the last and fourth area of great sales leaders is recruiting. Your job is to put the best players on the team. And I'll tell you, if I go out and find a superstar, even if I got, let's say my budget headcount's 5, I got 5 great good salespeople, and I stumble across a stud, I'll bring her on. I'll go over headcount. And because what happens is now what I thought was my not so, my 5th good one, but they were good, maybe they're not really as good as I think they are. And then my superstars, that new person really pushes them up. So just like athletes have to reapply for the job every single year, we should as sales.
Yeah, wow. And man, this is so essential, and it's an ongoing process. Anybody listening to this, you can't just chill at a point in time thinking that you've already done it, right? And that's what Nathan's also telling you. You got to consistently keep doing and elevating the level that you're working at. And if you are like that, you love the books, you love his knowledge that he shared today. And if you want to interact with him more, Nathan, where can people find you? What's the best way to get in touch?
Man, the easiest way to get in touch with us is go to our website, which is www.nathanjamail.com. We have videos on YouTube. We always tell people we're Googleable. If you want information, you go to nathanjamail.com. Reach out to us, and we'll get you content, discuss events. And I make a living doing three things. I write books, I do speeches, and I do coaching. And that's it.
Wow.
And so so that's the best way to get a hold of us.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate this.
Thank you. Take care.